Welcome to the Beyond the Reef podcast, where I talk to experts and researchers in the reef aquarium hobby, discussing a broad range of topics from biology to equipment and chemistry. We take a deep dive into our guests' methods, techniques, and top reef keeping tips. My name is Adam Sutherland, and I am the owner-operator of Frag Garage Corals, based out of British Columbia, Canada. My guest for this episode is Jason Brown, also known better as Unorthodox Reef, and you can find him on Instagram. He's got a great Instagram channel with lots of videos and content. You can find a full article on Jason's 400-gallon reef in Coral Magazine. I'll link to the issue in the show notes. He's also been selected as the Reef to Reef Tank of the Month and received the Reef Choice Award 2022. He's an aircraft composite specialist by day, so has a knack for fabricating and building things himself. We definitely discussed a broad range of things today. We did some focusing on recovering sick and compromised corals, as well as fads and trends in the reef hobby today. And I hope you enjoy the conversation because I had a great time talking to Jay. If you want to support this podcast, the best thing you can do is subscribe and share it with other people in the reef and saltwater community. And here's my conversation with Unorthodox Reef. All right, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me finally. We've been talking about doing this for a while.
Yeah, too long, man.
So I guess a first question I wanted to throw at you was, what do you think is unorthodox about your style of reefing?
Probably because I have trouble listening or following trends. I basically just try to figure everything out on my own. I've had lots of books and stuff, and I've gone through a lot of info, but it's mostly like, how can I fix that problem and how can I engineer it to work for me? I do things backwards. Like I mentioned to you before, I run my filter socks before my returns, not at where the drain comes in, right? So I feel like I try to do things differently. At the time, I was trying to think of a name for Instagram. Like, what can I do what can I make that sounds different? And it just came up, and then now I'm stuck with it.
Yeah, no, I think it's got a good sound to it. But yeah, what do you think are some trends that are kind of, I'd say, bullshit or a waste of time that are kind of, being talked about right now?
I'm going to say trace elements.
Yeah.
Not for me, not for you, not for everybody that talks about it. Like, you listen to all the other podcasts, or other people talk, or online, there's huge systems, right? You have massive amounts of corals. I get messaged all the time by people like, oh, I'm dosing this or I'm dosing that. But they have a small tank with equivalent to like one colony maybe, right?
Yeah. One colony in our world of colonies might be their entire tank.
Yeah. Are you, right? Like the tank I have now that's set up, I ran just over a year before I started doing trace elements.
Yeah.
And that was where I'm like, okay, I can start to see colors shifting a bit. Maybe I'll start adding some trace because I'm not keeping up on water changes. But like, I had massive amounts of corals, and I was at the point where, okay, I can still get by. Like, it's still taking a long time for things to deplete. Now, had I maybe started earlier, I probably wouldn't have ran into a bit of a depletion. But at the same time, like, majority of reefers have a mixed reef. So we need to, like, the trend of having to dose everything and buying all these products, I think it's making it harder for reefers.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, like, if you have a fairly empty tank with new water and not a ton of organisms in it, they're not competing like crazy for uptake. So, most likely, like, don't send an ICP in for the first, 6 months to a year, unless you're concerned there's something like some heavy metals or some other issue going on, and that's kind of one of your tools for diagnosing it. But I mean, when your water's new, your water should be, if you're using a good salt, it should be pretty in line with natural seawater. Which
most salts are good salts. Like, there is, I choose with a couple of brands that I've tried and bounced back and forth, but the issues would mainly affect someone who's got a lot of corals, or where it's throwing things out of balance because this element is way too high, and everything's just fighting. But most people that are starting off for the first couple of years, if it's just do a water change, keep it simple, right? And testing with stuff. Like I have a nano I set up for fun for the first time in January. It's a 15-gallon little nano, and I basically put a chunk of live rock, SBS, and mixed reef, and I just, for 1 month, I tested and dosed alpha reef. I haven't tested January, and it's thriving.
Yeah.
I haven't done anything. No fish, but
Yeah.
it's just I'm keeping it, just leaving it alone.
Yeah, and I guess would you bother, just out of curiosity, doing an ICP on that tank just to be like, well, I wonder if it's like this tank I barely have to touch. I wonder if the trace elements are in line just by chance, or if it's just working for whatever other reasons, you know?
And the nano,
I mean, not that I
maybe.
think you should ICP a nano. I think you should just let the nano be a nano, but you know.
well, I guess I look at it as I have so many corals on the side, it doesn't matter if stuff really fails on it. But it was I wanted to go a year without doing anything and see what happened. Would I do an ICP? Would I spend the money to get a result that I'm not 100% sure I trust? I don't know. I don't think so. I'd be worried that I would do an ICP, and then if I was all of a sudden there's a massive issue, maybe, and I can't figure it out, but it's a 15-gallon, I would just do 100% water change.
Yeah, totally. Or a water change from your other tank. Like, I'm sure you have enough water to water change that tank out 10 times in a row every time you change that system. Yeah.
I wouldn't even notice, right? I mean, I use my water out of my tank for my QT tanks.
Yeah.
And you barely even notice. It keeps my water changes going.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I don't think. No, I wouldn't waste the money on an ICP.
Yeah. No, that's fair. So anything else you think people are kind of doing with their tanks these days that's kind of overrated, or let's say like a waste of time?
I would have to say bacteria. I think people are caring so much on buying all these magic potion bacteria bottles that we have no idea what's in them. Until a company is going to say this is the exact bacteria in this bottle, it has to be kept at this temperature for this and dose at this amount, and this bacteria is needed for this, or this bacteria is proven to feed this coral. I'm going to say don't waste your money.
Yeah.
The bacteria is going to find its way, right?
So, I mean, that's maybe not true for all of them. A few of them do list some of the strains. That being said, I've heard some of them containing lactobacillus, which is like the bacteria that's in yogurt and cheese and whatnot.
Yeah.
Which apparently does not occur in the ocean. So, yeah, I mean, I think I hope that as this aqua biomics gathers more data, and I've talked to Eli before, I hope that like we can start learning from that data as it comes in. So even though it's still pretty young as far as like a test you can do for your tank, I think the more data he gets, the better the testing is going to get and the more helpful it will be.
And so with that, we'll find out if we're adding this bacteria, does it stay in our tank?
Yeah.
Is it feeding a different bacteria? Is it now pushing a good bacteria out, or like is it actually helping or throwing off the balance, or is it just becoming a carbon source and are we just basically carbon dosing?
Yeah,
and
I mean, that might be
case,
it's kind of like the term with taking multivitamins as being expensive pee, you know. It's like if you're adding, bottles of bacteria, it might just be getting converted. But yeah, I mean, in my experience, I've always started tanks from previous established tanks with old school live rock. And I've always had really good cycles on tanks. I think it's just where it's becoming a more complex space is tanks that are starting from dry rock. But I mean, in my opinion, just like get some rock from a buddy. Like if you, everybody must know some other reefer locally that has a tank that they trust, their rock, and get some of their bacteria, even put some of their water in your tank. Like I remember there was a system that I used to trade with this guy quite a bit, and I loved the way his corals looked, especially like his zoanthids were just so puffy and healthy, and I trusted his quarantine protocol. And I don't recommend this for everybody, but I definitely trusted his quarantine protocol when it came to his zoanthids, and I would always add the water from his system, and I swear my tank looked better It was like an infusion of just whatever good strains were going on in that tank seemed to do good things for mine. So, yeah, and you would be one of those trusted reefers, right? Like you would be somebody that locally, if somebody went to you, you can say, yeah, like I think that your the images of your tank and your attention to detail kind of speak for themselves, that people can probably trust that, you would be a good source to seed a tank from. And I think your Nano is a good example of that too.
Yeah, for sure. I try to help out as many newbies or newcomers that come out, and I see people with problems that I'll offer up, like, here, I have some rubble or even detritus. Like a friend of mine was having troubles with his tank, and I just handed him a bag of like mud and malm for the bottom of my sump, and I'm like, just dump this in. He's like this looks like a mess. Like, you don't want me to dump this in my tank? I'm like, trust me, dump it in your tank. And his tank like turned around and right away, right? It was just because it was just dry rock and that's it. And when I set up QT tanks, like I always keep a chunk of floss in one of my baffles that I don't clean, just like a piece, and then I'll set up a 29-gallon tank to QT fish. I'll just drop that piece of floss that's been in my tank forever.
Tons of surface area
in a trickle filter, and it's already done. Then I'll put a new one, and so I always have a couple that I rotate. It'd be nice to see stores having, like, those media balls, like I know Max Spec makes one, or you can buy the bricks, like the All-Blad bricks, like the export bricks. I don't think they're gonna, like, people don't need to buy them for their tanks to help with the nitrogen cycle. But if stores had them and they sold them
pre-soaked,
if they had a clean system, not a store that's full of flatworms and aptasia and all this stuff, right? But even so, I'd rather start off battling flatworms and aptasia than be battling all the uglies of not having bacteria in my tank.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I do think that for the most part, bacteria doesn't have a hard time reproducing in our systems. I don't think there's generally a lack of bacteria. I mean, there could be an imbalance, and some people that do add some of these bacteria products on a regular basis, maybe it's helping correct the balance slightly, but I wouldn't recommend it for anyone that has a system that's already converting good, has a good nitrogen conversion process happening.
I wanted to ask you where your nutrients are at, because that's always a thing that people are it's like this big, and people are always chasing these numbers. And I used to do that, and I like, okay, I got to keep it at this point. But
so I have experimented probably on both sides of nitrate and phosphate. I think I got it in my head about 2 years ago that nitrate was the thing I wanted to pay more attention to, and as long as the phosphate was, detectable, I would be okay. And things did okay. I had my nitrates as high as probably 25, and my phosphates were kind of in the 0.03, 0.04 kind of range. Maybe a little bit lower. Like, I probably would say they would measure 0 on occasion. And then recently, in the past year, I've let the nitrates kind of settle where they want to, which is kind of between 2 and 8. And my phosphates I've been putting more attention to, and I've been elevating them more to 0.04 to even 0.1. And I've noticed that my corals seem happier with the higher phosphate in relation. And I mean, what I just talked about was probably, if we're going to talk about the nutrient or the nutrient ratio, the red field ratio that we kind of think is what we should go by, it would be close to the 100 to 1 kind of range. If, that's kind of what I shoot for. But yeah, I mean, I really believe that a reef tank will find and generally will settle when you leave it alone and you let it do its thing. The biology wants to settle in whatever way it wants to. And often, I mean, sometimes the system just, for whatever reason, could be just like the strains of bacteria, and it just will never really quite find that niche. But I find most tanks, if you leave them alone, they'll just find their niche and they'll work just fine,
I think those tanks that never find their niche is from people that can't settle down and let their tank find it. So if you're one of those reefers that always has to add a fish, for example, right? So you've got a tank, let's say it's 100 gallon, and everything's great. And it's like, oh, I got to buy that fish. every fish you add is going to raise your nitrate and phosphate.
Yeah.
So find that line where if you're never stopping, your nutrients are always climbing. And then if you don't find that line where your tank can maintain a balance, like you said, where it's like, okay, like I'm at the point now where I was I'm like, I gotta dose nitrates because things were like it was bottomed out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, I gotta start dosing. And I'm like, you know what? Why? I'll just buy fish.
Yeah, that's a
So
great bonus. Yeah.
Right. Add fish, and then I'm like, okay, and then still low, add more fish. So now I'm at the point with the amount I have to feed for the angelfish and everything where my nitrates are like 10. They stay at 10.
Yeah.
And my phosphates are actually 0.3.
0.3. Okay.
Yeah, and so I fooled around. Because I bought the ESV? Is it calcium nitrate that they sell? And I raised it up with that to see what's going on after I had, because I'm like, you know what? Because you read about it and it's like, oh my God, it's a nutrient. I don't think it's nutrients. I think it's lighting.
Yeah.
And other elements that are out. But so, anyways, so I kept raising nitrate up to see what happened, because I'm like, I want to see if I can get that green algae to grow. Nothing.
Just watching the glass. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing's happening, nothing's changing. And I was holding it for I bring it up by 5 and hold it for over a week, 2 weeks. And then I hit finally 25 to 28 ppm. And all of a sudden I started noticing, okay, some of the corals don't look as happy. Some of my SBS, some of my, I think deeper water SBS kind of look, okay, well now my purple dragon is not opening anymore. I'm not seeing polyps. So I brought it back down, let it fall on its own, which is water changes and my corals pulling it out. Mm-hmm. And now if I do nothing at all, it sits at 10. But it seems because of all the fish I've added and the amount I have to feed and the foods I use, and my phosphates always hover between 1.5 and 3.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your system looks healthy. Your corals are growing. I mean, everything's happy. So
I notice a lot of corals react. Some corals react totally different to the nutrients.
Yeah.
Some
definitely.
of the FPS, the colors change completely. My pink lemonade is bright yellow now when my phosphates are high.
When your phosphates are high. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At 3, it's bright yellow. Mm-hmm. It's kind of whoa, I've never seen those colors come out of it before. It's hard to even take. When I take photos and I send you photos, it's pretty much full white lighting.
Yeah.
And then some corals, not so much. But on average, for me, it's just a lot less stressful to run them at a higher number and not worry about what happens if I'm not paying attention to my nitrates again, and then they bottom out. Because before I was trying to keep it at 5, being 3 and 5, and I was trying to keep my phosphate at to the point where I test and it's almost 0 today. And you're okay. No, it's 0.003, and then it's 0.0, and it was just, I was always on that racetrack of I'm about to have a catastrophic failure, and everything kind of crashed and bottomed out. I lost a couple torches, I lost some Ghani. So after that, I'm like, I'm just going to crank the nutrients and just relax.
Yeah,
and enjoy the tank more.
I mean, yeah, I definitely would say coral death often occurs from super low phosphates, bottoming out of phosphates. If I've tested and I've had for whatever reason, my phosphates have bottomed out for a couple of tests over the course of a week or two, that's when I'm probably going to start seeing a couple things go sideways. So it's I think, if there's something to really pay attention to, as far as nutrient levels, I would say that your phosphates are probably going to be more important if you have a system that gravitates towards lower phosphate levels.
Yeah. And it's kind of, and then so before I used to stress about it, right? And I would add GFO, and I'd add more GFO, and then I'm like, and then my alkalinity would drop.
Yeah,
from the
scary stuff.
And then I'm like, okay, what else is it pulling out, right? How much trait is it pulling out? And I remember there was a time when I was fighting it, and I used to have my Kato that in my fuge was growing like crazy. It was a spitting ball. It was bright green. Then I'm watching it slowly drift to a darker green, and then it was just all of a sudden all my trace was depleted. Mm-hmm. So, Was it from all me fighting my phosphates with GFO? Was it from my just not dosing enough trace? Was it from the algae? I don't know. But so now I try to keep things more relaxed. I don't have time.
It would be a good. I'm gonna probably do the occasional episode on this podcast where I do kind of a fact check and ask me a question kind of episode. That would be a good one to look into. Does GFO absorb trace elements? What else is it doing? Because like I got away from it many years ago, but I've generally run systems that have been lean in the phosphate department. But I think people need to be careful with that. I would honestly, like, if you have a full-blown reef tank, I would not touch that stuff. If you have a fish-only system, sure, go for it. Totally great at removing phosphates. It's highly efficient. Not very precise, but highly efficient.
Yeah.
You know?
Or if you had an episode spilt something in the tank.
Yeah.
Like you dumped the whole package of Reefroids in.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. Have you considered just adding more fish instead of dosing?
Yeah, I mean, I have added more fish, and it seems to help. I think one of the problems is that, like, my tank is so loaded with coral. Like, I'm not gonna add so many fish that they don't have enough swimming space. I mean, the corals are just getting too big. I have in my 6x3 tables, I have 2 of those. I think I would say 4 to 5 like larger tang / rabbit fish style fish, and then another 10 to 15 smaller fish. So anthias, clownfish, some wrasses, some gobies, blennies, things like that.
I'd recommend little damsels.
Yeah.
Like I added a group of 6 Roland's damsels and Ringaries, and amazing.
Cool.
They spend their whole day in the SBS, and I didn't know this, but the Rolands eat algae like crazy.
Cool.
So when I clean glass, picking it. So if you're looking for a small fish that can live in your acros, that kind of, and they chase the angels away. So it's kind of a neat little interaction they do. But I found them to be great, peaceful little fish that are awesome to add to it, right? But
what would you find? How many can get along in the same tank in a, let's say 100 gallons? How many do you think you could have?
Rollins?
Yeah.
I don't know. Probably, I would say if I were to do it in 100 gallon, I would add 5.
Okay. Interesting.
No less than 5.
Cool.
Or black cap damsel is another.
Yeah, I see them here. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I'm going to put things like this in the show notes too. So, I think that's, if they eat algae and if you can put a bunch of them, then that's a great little addition for nutrient.
They pick slightly, right? Like, so when I clean I'll see them picking the sand sometimes. And if I clean my glass, they come right up to the magnet and they're eating all the algae that comes off.
Yeah.
Or all the, so that's good. That's kind of cool. And they're just nice little fish to see swim around. They don't seem to jump or bug anybody, right? So
yeah, for sure. I think there was a shop that was I was talking to recently, and they were telling me they put a bunch of Springer damsels in their LPS system, and they told me that they eat some of the flatworms, which maybe is possible. I don't know. I'm
gonna say it might have happened if someone blew them off with a turkey baster, and then they're like, "Oh, this is food," and they ate it. Mm-hmm. But they're not the type of fish that I see in my tank that do that.
Yeah.
What I see is I see them they hang out in acros. So I've got a mixed reef. They're always in my acros. They're always in the large stag behind me. They're always just in there chilling, and they nest below the acro colony. So I have a bunch that breed and they release their fry, which to me, I always try to get fish that will breed in my tank because then I'm like, oh, free food,
great
right?
Food.
Free food from
Best
baby
food.
coral, their fish. Yeah. Okay. So I don't see them roaming around doing that because they stay in a 12-inch section. They don't travel the tank. Like, they have their own little place. They stay there. They protect it. So if you had a tank with flatworms, I mean, maybe if you added a bunch, I think you're better off with peppermint shrimp.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, peppermint shrimp and the right type can be
there's
great.
like I never pronounce the name. It's with a K. There's the
Quakenthali are the ones from Jakarta that I've been talking about for sure. Those are great. I've also had really good success with certain kinds of wrasses and certain kinds of flatworms too. Melanaris can take out those red planaria. I think they're probably not the tastiest thing to them, but I think in the right situation, they'll probably pick them off. I've had them completely empty a tank of them before without having to do any, chemical treatments. So, yeah, I would definitely put them on the list of good. Let's not call it a pest. Well, I guess we can call it a pest. They're not a parasite, but they're a pest. But
yeah, okay. I would say if anybody's listening to this and they're looking for a wrasse, the Melanurus wrasse is a great wrasse for the fact that they seem to come in healthy. Same with the yellow chorus.
Yeah.
But the Melanurus wrasse gets large over time. Same with the Radiant wrasse. I had one get over 7-inch in my old tank. So,
yeah.
And then it starts going after snails and stuff. Whereas if you get like an ornate leopard wrasse or something like that, they seem to stay slightly smaller. Although they're harder to get a good one. It seems like this. I don't know, but I'll get a bunch and then half of them, they live a month and a half and then they just perish, right? Or a tamarin, over time they're less likely to go after your inverts. So, I mean, if you're looking for a quick fix, Melanurus for sure.
Yeah.
But
No, I agree. I mean, they do get big and they can be kind of aggressive, especially towards other wrasses. But if they're the only wrasse in the tank, and maybe you got a 6-line in there who is also an asshole, they can just both be assholes together. Have an asshole club.
Everybody hates 6-lines. I have 2 in my tank and I love them.
Yeah.
But they're a pair. They breed. So
cool.
It's kind of funny. They hate each other. And then all of a sudden they're best friends and they protect each other and they hate each other. So they kind of keep each other busy.
Yeah, it sounds like a regular marriage, really.
Yeah, and awesome wrasses. That would, yeah.
I was thinking we hit a little bit of a subject here because we're I don't know. I like that we're jumping around. We don't really have it. There's no rules here, but okay. I thought we could talk about, because this is something people ask me about a lot, troubleshooting compromised corals that are kind of going sideways. Indications being colors fading, colors getting too dark, maybe bleaching, like loss of zooxanthellae, lack of polyp extension, tissue, and then getting into tissue recession, necrosis. I mean, we're talking RTN, STN. So if you have a coral, not that you're doing a lot of acquiring these days, but if you have a coral that is not looking so good, what are some of the first things you do to check for, to sort of diagnose the situation?
First, I check to make sure there's nothing bothering it. Like, okay, is there any chance that there's anything close by that could be stinging this coral at night? Is there a sponge touching it? Because sponges will destroy your SPS if you're not careful, or other corals, right? So I go through that and I'm like, okay, that's fine. Why is this coral unhealthy, right? So I'm like, okay, so I'll look at, okay, but all the other corals are healthy, so why is this one not healthy, right? Unless they're bad. If I've got a group of them that are bad, I'm like, okay, there's something wrong. But if it's just one, I won't even at first consider checking any parameters. Like I check let's be honest, I'm so scared of my tank sometimes. Like, it's stressful. Like, I check my apex before bed every day. I check my apex in the morning. I check work break. Like, it's like this, like a habit, right? It's like when you smoke, you just like go. But anyways, so I check to make sure there's nothing bothering it. Like, okay, are fish picking at it, or is something going on? So, and if that looks fine, then I'll just move it. I'll move it to a different location. I'm like, okay, well, maybe, because my brain always goes, is it flow or lighting? Is always my first thought. So, okay, well, maybe it's only getting linear flow here. So I'll move it to a place in my Frag system where I know the flow is perfect, where I know corals are thriving. And then if things don't improve fairly soon in there, then I'm like, okay, something's off. Now I got to say, is this a coral that needs more light or less light? Is the spectrum wrong in the one tank I have? But
yeah, I mean, I think something you need to ask is, how long has that coral been in that spot, and how long has it been happy in that spot already? So, like, before you blame light, you have to go like, well, I grew this coral under this light in this spot. So unless there's a change in light from shading from another coral around it, same thing goes with flow.
Yeah.
Like,
so then
has the flow changed, or is there other coral around it that's restricting the flow that's getting to it?
exactly. That's what I was just going to say. So that would be my, if it's a coral in my tank right behind me, sorry, people can't see. If it's a coral in my display, that's not shaded by another coral, and if it's not being stung or bothered or touching something too close, for me right away it's flow. Mm-hmm. There's has to be flow or something, or maybe it's something from the flow is dumping something on it, or how the flow is restricted from the other coral. So, and that's a big battle I have in my tank, because as corals grow, I'm always having to change the flow, which I think a lot of people don't think about, is they just put their pumps in place and then, oh, this is good, I'm done.
Yeah.
I've changed pumps so many times.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly modifying them, just like increasing them, like, okay, now this, I probably should just hard reset some of the corals and just like start over.
Well, I mean, some of them just get so massive that when you have a colony that's, that 12 to, let's say, 18-inch size, it needs a lot of flow to get, through all, if it's an SPS, to get through all the branches, to kind of make sure that every little bit of that coral is getting thoroughly exchanged on a regular basis.
So I find that the corals I have that are restricted for flow, and if there's something going on where they're losing color, the corals that are the first to have issues are the ones that are not in a great flow. Mm-hmm. There's still flow, like it's going by, but it's not erratic, or it's not, maybe that coral can't exchange water properly, like something's not. So that's always, okay, I should move that coral. But again, like, it's weird. It's like, I think sometimes corals just suck.
Yeah. Like, I think sometimes it's literally just the coral. Like, it's not necessarily anything you did, especially if you're bringing in, like we talked about, you're not adding a lot of new stuff to your system. But if you were adding maricultured SPS and, wild collected or maricultured, say, Euphilia or other kinds of corals, like, you might get a coral that comes in looking really healthy, but it might not transition into an aquarium condition, and there might be something that came in with it in the ocean that inevitably, like, is going to be its death, even if it's not right away. It might be 6 months in, it might be a month in. I've definitely seen it with the maricultured SPS.
And or like bacteria is different in your tank, right? Like things, like corals feeding on this, now it's like, okay, I've got to learn to eat this. Like, I know corals adapt, but there's a lot of stressors from a coral that comes from the ocean, or but like, so yeah, for me, it's always, are a lot of corals bad? But like you said, sometimes there's no control over what. Like, I have two corals, I'll have two colonies the same in my tank, or I have a frag system behind my tank that's the same water, and corals in that tank do amazing, mm-hmm. and then some corals tank, and no matter what I do, I can't keep that coral alive in this tank. Yeah. So for me, then it's like lighting. What's going on? Is my lighting different? And it is slightly different. But who knows, right?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, not everyone is going to have the option to pull a coral out and put it in a different system with different, let's say more ideal conditions. And I don't recommend that everybody just immediately takes a coral and moves it, because I think in some cases that's going to stress it more. But, in our situation, like, you and I have the experience to kind of be able to assess what we think is, like a good course of action for it. But that's not going to be an option for everyone. I mean, I think for most people, if you're going to troubleshoot, one of the things you should do, obviously, is check your parameters, but also, like, double check your parameters. Like, not like if you're running a Trident or some kind of automated testing system, they're not always going to be perfect. And sometimes you're going to have a calibration issue that could be wildly off. Like, I find with the Trident, you probably noticed this too, the calcium and magnesium test low as they start to get towards the bottom of the reagent.
I ignore my calcium magnesium on the Trident.
Yeah, you're mostly just using it for elk. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of times I'll run out of the calcium magnesium reagent, mm-hmm. and I'll just leave it empty. I'll just manually hit the elk.
Totally do that. I totally do that too. Yeah. I mean, I'm just going to get the most out of this, elk liquid as I can.
Save a little bit of elk left in each one, and I put them all in a container and I reuse them. And it's, my test answer might be off. But I'm watching to see if there's a huge fluctuation over time, right? Mm-hmm. So like if my guidance wrong, like you said, the magnesium, calcium is sometimes low or it's wrong. But it's telling me my calcium's 360, but it's actually 400.
Yeah.
And it stays at 360.
Yeah.
And then it starts to drift down. I'm like, okay, is it the reagents or is my calcium drifting down? So I don't care about the number as much as what's going on.
Yeah, you care about the stability more than the number. Yeah, because like corals they'll find those calcium ions. They're going to be able to get them. If there's enough of them kicking around, they'll absorb what they need to grow properly. So something else I would say as far as assessing. We talked about this earlier, but I think if you're going to pay attention to any elements outside of the major elements, say carbonate, calcium, magnesium, check your iodine and potassium. Iodine, I don't love the iodine kits that are on the market for hobby grade. Potassium, I do like the Salifert, and I can attest to its accuracy because I pretty much always, before I send off an ICP, I do a potassium test on my Salifert, and it's usually within 10 ppm of the result I get on the ICP. So
every time I check my potassium, it's always been fine. So I just okay, and I just stopped doing it. But
but it's definitely, I've seen corals suffer if it's below 350 iodine. Like if that bottoms out, you might start losing corals. I mean, for sure, you want to make sure you have a level in that. What is it, 0.05 to 0.08 or 0.5, 0.08, something like that. I'm not gonna. I'll list the numbers later. It's hard to remember.
Claude from Fauna is going on a lot now about iodine and fluorine ratios. Mm-hmm. And I think there's I don't know if he's I think there's something to that, because every time I've had my iodine go off a certain way, right away there's an issue. So that maybe there'll be something more to learn about. We'll learn more as he's pushing those products and things are changing and the ICPs are changing. And so that could be something that I wish we could test better for.
I think they'll certain elements are just hard to test for, and that just is what it is. I think strontium is a trickier one because it's similar to magnesium and some other elements, and I think maybe the reaction gets confused by some of the similar elements, so it's hard to isolate. But I can't speak to the chemistry of it, but I don't think there's a great strontium test kit out there. There is one from Salifert, and overall, would you agree that the Salifert kits are the best on the market?
Yeah, 100%. I still use Salifert. I have Hannah, but I've always trusted Salifert, so I always go to I'll always use Salifert for magnesium, calcium, and to confirm with I check a couple times a year to confirm the trident stain. I'm not an avid tester. I have the Hannah nitrate phosphate, and I'll go a long time without even checking. I'm just things are fine. Yeah. And I'll check. I'm it's still at 10. But before, when I was running that close line out, it was this is stressful. I got to test. I'm ready to take notes, watching my lot. I just kind of now trying to be more chill, and my tank's doing better.
Yeah. No, that's good.
As we were talking about coral markers, what things you look for, color is big for me. Mm-hmm. Sometimes corals will start to change color, and sometimes it's this coral's getting nicer, but actually it's not. It's starting to get more green, or it's starting to get, the pink's really coming out, but no, it's paling out, right? So sometimes you're thinking a coral is doing better, or that's bringing that color out, but there's a lot of canary corals that I have that really tell me, okay, something's off. I have, I think it's called in my Aggie torque, but it's just a purple torque. Yeah. When everything's jiving and the lighting's perfect, it starts off white and purple, and then it gets like this nice glowing green. But when something's off, if I'm missing something, it'll be purple, right? And then there'll just be a little bit of green around the base. And I'm like, okay, there's something off of my tracer. There's something going on. But
and that green metallic kind of base, and I know what you're talking about with the Miyagi. I've found the same with PC Rainbow, which is a really easy coral to grow. But I've found my colonies have kind of lost a lot of that metallic pigment that's in the base. I talked to Ray from Pirates Reef. He thinks it's lower light is how you achieve more of that color.
I think we need to treat some of these corals like we treat Montipora now. Yeah. Like sometimes, like we're thinking that, as an acro, it needs all this light.
Yeah.
But I have acros that, or even like Anicoporas that have dropped off my plug and they're under my rack and it's like thriving like crazy. And
yeah.
How is this possible? It's getting like no light. It's doing amazing. Like it's encrusting under my egg crate. Like, so it's like, okay, well maybe, but it's nicer under my egg crate than it is on my rack. So then I know it's lighting, right? So I think like with our LEDs now, they're so bright. There's so much like they're
so much penetration.
Everywhere. It's like everywhere over the coral. So now it's strong light. Like before we had T5s that reflect off the glass. I'm thinking it's like now we've got laser beams everywhere, right?
Freaking laser beams.
Freaking laser beams. Are these laser beams like burning our corals? I don't know. For like after we talked the other day, for fun, I turned off my reef brights to see because the only difference I have in my display and my frag tank, they're all Radion Pros, is my display has reef brights, and I have different colors in the coral. So I turn off the reef brights and I want to see what's going on. Don't tell Tulio. Because every time I turn them off, he's like, well, where are they? They're not in your photos, but no.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess another thing that probably doesn't apply to you because you're not bringing in new stuff regularly, but obviously one of the first things I do, especially in my quarantine system, is I check for signs of pests. You know, I mean, that's going to be one of the main things. Like in your case, you keep a variety of angels and fish that maybe occasionally have an appetite for a polyp or two. But you probably have a pretty good residence by this point.
I'm at the point now where I think the angels are keeping my corals happier.
Yeah.
Sounds crazy, but I've got corals in my display that are touching that if I had them touching in my frag tank, they would kill each other. But touching in my display, and if I watch my angels all day, everywhere where corals fight, they eat that. So the coral can't. If the second a coral puts out a stinger, the angel bites it.
Interesting.
So it's so like my chalices are like they're touching acro. Like there's nothing. Like everybody's like the Raja Rampage chalice is supposed to set out like crazy feelers. Never. Yeah. It's kind of like, okay, I'm gonna die if I put these out, right?
Yeah, it must be something that's like something that's more palatable about that sort of vulnerable tissue or whatever that's extending from that. Yeah.
But like you said, with pests, I mean, a long time ago, I had a bout with so many pests, and that's why it's been like quarantine. But like it's the first thing I do. If I do get a frag from somebody I trust, even if it's somebody I trust and I've seen their tank and I know it's great, I cut the frag off the plug. No plug. It's gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Clean and the piece of epoxy that's on it. So I love it when someone frags with epoxy or the plastic where they put, you do like and some people are like, oh, don't do that. It's a waste. You're better off with a crazy glue. No. If you have that ball of epoxy, then the person who receives that frag can easily just pop the coral with the ball off the plug. Now they've got a plug that's reusable, and now they've got a nice little round ball to glue in their tank. And now you just have to clean the bottom of that ball. I'll scrape it clean, and I'll make sure it's completely coated with glue. I'll re-glue it. There's no dead tissue anywhere. But like you said, if there's polyps closed on a coral, it's like, okay, oh no, do I have red bugs?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'm gonna do a pest episode at some point and get super deep into all the pests, but people can just watch out for that, because we could, I don't know, I'd easily spend an hour and a half talking about pests, just getting into each one.
Nudie rat, my bane of my night. Like,
yeah. Well,
copper band butterfly.
Those Quake and Thali peppermint shrimp, they eat those Monty-eating nudies like nobody's business. Really? They just snack on the eggs and the adults like in seconds. Yeah. Well, because I set up a tank that I put like I think 10 or 15 in, and I had those Monty-eating nudies in one of my systems, and I just, every time I see a piece with them on it, I just put it in there and I just like watch them go to town on it immediately. They waste no time, because I didn't overfeed that tank either, so they're all kind of hungry for whatever comes at them, and they just they completely eliminated them. So
I know they go after planaria for sure, because a friend of mine, he I got some, and then he took some, and then they took all his planaria out, right? So it's kind of, this is amazing, right? But I regret not keeping them just for that, for back. But it's funny, why don't we see them? How come they're not, like, why is this not something that we're talking about more? Why is it just because the wholesalers are bringing in whatever peppermint shrimp they can get at that time because of temperature, and then they're just telling us these are and then why don't we focus more on? Why aren't we?
I think we should be breeding them, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, as far as I understand, breeding shrimp is similar to breeding clownfish. Like, I think it's a similar kind of rotifer culture. Move them to brine, and I mean, once they're probably a certain size, they're probably pretty indiscriminate as far as what they will eat. So it'd be nice to see.
Like before, like when I got into the hobby, and it was like breeding clownfish was like, oh my god, this is gonna be so hard. Like, and I remember I was at a time I did seahorses. I was breeding seahorses, and it was hard. Like, I had to order stuff from Florida to make Fido. Like, now it's you can go to any store and get live food and Fido, like, and rotifers. You can just get it. Yeah. So I wish people like that. We need to be doing this. Like, hobbyists should be. It should be more of a hobby.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm willing to take on that challenge at some point and try to start breeding. I'd rather breed shrimp than fish, to be honest. I mean,
I read an article on harlequin shrimp in I think Coral magazine, and I was like, okay, I should look into this. Like, because harlequin shrimp apparently they eat algae at a certain stage, so
really?
they're actually, you can just do it in a bucket. So, but then you get to a point where it's okay, what do I do with all these harlequin shrimp?
Yeah.
Now I need starfish.
I mean, there's most people have some asterinas kicking around if they don't have harlequins, so you can find them.
I love my asterina starfish. So.
Yeah. No, I don't think that they're generally a pest. I think it's possible that I have seen them pick at zoas before, but it's hard to say if it's not just an opportunity where the zoa was having an issue anyways.
So you know how you see zoas sometimes they'll melt away.
Yeah.
And it seems it's always like your most expensive zoa, I've got this huge colony of like speckled crack or something. All of a sudden you see this like white on it, and then it starts to slowly melt. They get smaller and smaller, and then you're like, and they're covered in asterina, or what are they, Nostra starfish? I don't know what the name is now anymore. They're covered in, and it's like, oh, the starfish are eating. I think they eat bacteria, right? So if you look at night, your tank, they're on the biofilm, like they're looking for biofilm, and if you have an acro that RTNs, they're climbing that acro, and they're not eating the coral, they're eating the bacteria. They're cleaning it, they're protecting it. Now, that being said, if you drop one on a coral, like if you take one and drop it like on probably a chalice and leave it there, it'll eat and burn that area. Damage coral that way. And I once watched one just get a little bit out of hand and eat a green Cephastria. Like, I watched it through the Cephastria, and I know that like it's perfectly healthy. Like, it probably had some bacteria on the edge, and it just
it got a taste for it, and it just went for it. Yeah.
I mean, I have so many now that I actually have a harlequin shrimp in my Frag tank, and it sits in the corner, and the harlequin shrimp hasn't moved in months. It just sits there because it knows that the starfish come to it.
Yeah.
Like, it's hilarious. Every time my friends come over, I'm like, look, it's still there. Like, it hasn't moved. It hasn't moved an inch.
Yeah, what a life, hey? I like the harlequin shrimp is one of my party tricks when I have non-reef people over. It's like, check this thing out.
I used to have a chocolate chip. in my sump that I would cut off the legs, and I'm like, hey, this is getting like you're cutting the leg off, and you're like, oh, poor star. It grows back, but
Yeah.
to the point where I had a couple of them, and it was like, okay, I can just keep doing this, and then after a while, like, yeah, I'm starting to feel a little bit guilty about it, and I
Yeah,
stop.
the leg's not going to grow back as fast as the
No,
shrimp can.
no, so you'd have a group of them, right? But
Yeah.
now you're just the sadistic guy that's cutting off starfish legs. Like,
Yeah, totally. So I guess another thing on this coral recovery thing, if we're talking SPS, I mean, something that we know I would say like a last resort is to cut the colony up. In my experience, I think you have to cut quite a bit higher and further away from the necrosis than you would think. Like, have you found the same thing?
100%. And I've burned myself so many times I'm like, okay, I'll pull the colony out and I'll put it in a container and I'll cut it up. And now I've just spread that bacteria everywhere because it's in the container.
Yeah.
So if I see a colony doing that, my first reaction is, okay, if this is my only colony, I don't want to lose this because I don't want to have to bite again. And it's just something basic. Like most of my corals are classic corals too. It happened to a tricolor that I've had forever. It was like huge, and it just was in a spot where it wasn't getting flow, and detritus and stuff would sit on it. And then one day I look and it's starting to, it's peeling from the base, right? So instead of right away taking it out, I went right in the middle where it looks still healthy and it still has polyps. I cut off a frag before I did anything. So now I've got a clean frag, dip that frag, reglue it, and move it to a different frag system. So now it's okay. I've got
and
one.
What did you dip that in? Do you dip it in some kind of recover or just like a revive or?
I think I just use revive. I probably should have done an iodine dip, maybe, or even. Sorry, I just blanked on. What's the one for cyano?
Chemiclean.
Chemiclean, but Chemiclean might have been a good idea.
Yeah.
Like mix up. So I do that, and then after, now where that is, I'm like, okay, I don't want this to spread. So that's because I've had it where I'm this touching other corals, and now it's like, okay, now I'm fighting a war of this RTN is spreading, and what in the past, like what is this going to just go and I lose all my acros? Like what's going to happen? So I'll turn off the flow in that area, and I usually take I have a little shop vac. It's like a 5-gallon shop vac, and then I have made up like a little PVC hose that goes to it that reduces down to like a 3/8 tube. So now I've got a shop vac that's got good suction, and I'll get in there and I'll try to clean off anything that's peeling. And then especially if it's like an LPS and it's a brown jelly, I'll just suck it right out. Like,
get it the hell
rest that going
out
anywhere.
of there. Yeah.
Right. I don't want it to spread. And some people say it's a myth that it spreads. I don't know. Every time I've had it, it spreads.
It can spread, I think, mostly to things that are close by, but I think depends on the system too, size of the system, the kind of flow style.
Yeah. Or thinking it's spreading, or is it everything already infected?
Yeah.
So then I'll knock that colony out. I'll take the colony out, and out of water, I'll cut off what frags I think are clean, drop them in a clean bucket, and then I'll just toss the rest. And like you said, I used to try to be like, it's like a branch, right? And you're like, I'll cut an inch away from that on this stag branch, and then what's the point? Now it's in my frag tank, and I wake up the next morning, just a bunch of white branches. So and it's like I just spent 2 hours of my time fragging this whole colony up, and 2 survived. So now it's more of I just toss it. And
no, for sure. I agree. We always want to try to save as much as possible, but I think that bacteria, and if it's bacteria related, it's kind of like already further along than you think by the time you're seeing tissue coming off.
Yeah, it's been in the coral for a long time. Like it's there's been issues for a long time, and now it's just given it.
Yeah, and that's something to be said for, the health of any coral, but if you're talking euphilia, the flesh band is a really good indication of the health of euphilia. If the flesh band is like nice and meaty and it comes down the skeleton far, even if it's growing actively. I've actually got some euphilia that are some hammers from Australia, and some of them have encrusted on my egg crate in that system. I've never seen that happen before. It literally grew down the stalk onto the egg crate. So
That's cool.
And same with SPS. I mean, I think a healthy spreading base is a good indication of a coral's health,
especially on a torch. Like you could tell right away, like someone like, I just got this torch, and I'm like, I only see like a little, like there's just a little bit of flesh. So that torch is dying, or it had too much flow and the flesh is peeled back. It's been receding, right? So like a torch, you want that torch to be like 3 inches. Like say you have the polyp of the torch is, you've got 3 polyps, right? Mm-hmm. Those 3 polyps are now starting to separate. You want that flesh to be still connected. Like it's like, can't even frag a polyp of this torch off because it's the flesh. Like it actually, like there should be a lot of flesh. Like I have a torch that you also had the same thing happen where I was one day, I'm looking in my frag tank at a piece of live rock, and I'm like, what is that? Are those baby hammers? And I found there's like these tiny single little polyps that were like like 1/32 of an inch, and I'm like, it's glowing. So I like zoom in on it, and I'm like, that looks like a little hammer, and I see like there's a gold one and a green one, and
cool.
And it was just on a piece of live rock. And then I isolated them, and they grew out, and it's called. I ended up with like a Dragon Soul and a New York Knicks or something.
Yeah, cool.
Which I've never bought, but I had a black and like a purple torch, and I had a green torch, and I had a Dragon Soul torch. So I'm guessing they spawned, and then.
So you think you got a morph out of those together?
Yeah. So then I got because I've never bought a New York Knicks.
Yeah, you're like, I didn't add that to my tank. I never had that.
Yeah. So now it's the biggest one I have, right? So it's
cool.
Super nice torch, only under blue light.
Yeah. I would really like to be able to get. I think if we can get better, like we were talking about with breeding peppermint shrimp, like things like that. Like if we can move the hobby in that direction. And start to understand coral breeding a little bit more, I think that will be really, really helpful. Something when I was in Bali in the facility, their packing facility back in February this year, there was a girl that she kind of worked in the kind of higher end LPS area, and she told me that all of their torches spawned every month on the new moon, like clockwork. And these are torches that are in a packing facility that's like, has a ceiling. Like the moon is not within view. However, there's just something is clocked in with them where they know it's time to breed. Let's do this, every month.
So why aren't we doing this more often? Why?
Yeah. And I wonder, if something's been in a captive aquarium for a certain amount of time, does it start to lose that tracker? Like I actually forgot to, but I did buy torches from that supplier, and I realized that I should have tried to track the new moon and based on this same cycle they were on in Bali, and see if they were breeding in my system, because I think maybe corals after a certain amount of time, like you probably had SPS breeding before, right? Yeah, we talked about this. You sent me a video.
I talked about it.
Yeah.
I had a huge green tort. It started as a little frag, and now it's probably, I don't know, 14 inches or something, 16 inches around. And it was just, I like to check my tank before bed a lot, just because I like looking at the moonlight, seeing the little critters crawl around. And it's a good time to check the health of corals too, right? You get a flashlight, look under things. Yeah. And I'm like, what's going on here? Like I'm seeing these tiny little orange balls coming up at the surface, and I'm like, something's spawning. So I'm looking everywhere, and it was just, so I caught it on video, which is pretty cool. So it spawned, and I caught some and isolated them, but nothing came out of it. I got some good photos, and apparently they were fertilized. But what had happened was I put them all in a container because you're not prepared for it. You're never prepared for this. It just, and I don't have my light set on any special cycle. I just turn the blue lights on, sure. But I do have light coming in. My tank does get full sunlight. Yeah. So maybe that has something, like it's in the basement, but it gets sunlight from like 1 to, let's say, 5 o'clock or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. From the window directly across from it. So maybe that has something to do with it, where it knows it's sensing that rise or that change. Mm-hmm. Because there was coral spawning at the same time as my spawn in the wild. So it wasn't like it's just random. It's like something happened in the world, and so did my coral. I wish I knew where it came from because I've had it forever. I like, where is this coral from? Where I have no idea. But I should. So now I'm scared. I don't want to check. I don't want to change my lighting that much. Now I just turn the reef rates off.
Yeah.
But I want to. Again, is it going to happen again? Like, can I do it? But
I mean, you know which day it happened on, so check it in a year. Like for a few nights around that anniversary, basically check it again. Yeah.
You're right. So like I said, I wasn't ready. Like I put everything in a glass container. I tossed frag plugs in it. I put an air stone because I'm like, what do I do? But what had happened is majority of them got sucked into the air stone. So if I regret not just having like a slow drip and letting the water maybe trickle out of it through a screen or something, or have, instead of an air stone, just have a bubble, or just leave it. Like, do I even need, like, I don't know enough.
Well, here's another little funny thing that a friend of mine suggested, and I guess he'd read about this, is apparently the coral, like the eggs, they find their way back to the reef from the sounds of the reef. And I don't know if it has to do with sound and vibrations, but for them to feel comfortable to essentially settle and start putting their little feelers down and start to encrust, they find their way back to the reef from the sound of things like the clicking of the peppermint shrimp, any like sounds of the reef, they'll find their way back. So his little funny little suggestion was, if they ever do it again, play some sounds of the reef music. Not music, but just like, meditative kind of sounds of the reef, and that'll make them comfortable to settle down.
Coral, like, set the tone for them.
Yeah, make it romantic. Hey, let's settle down, corals.
I wonder if he does that. Like, I wonder if he's got like that calm background when he's doing corals. No.
Yeah. Put on some Barry White while you're at it too.
Yeah. No,
Marvin
that's
Gaye.
funny.
Yeah.
That's something I feel like I really like. For me in the hobby, my next step, if I have time with my life, is I should look into. I should breed something again. It's just the setup, right? When you have so much going on, it's hard to throw that in, but
yeah.
This should be my next step. Now, that being said, maybe a bunch of these corals are going to start popping up in my tank.
Yeah, you can you can wait and see for sure. Maybe
that's why I have that acro that has a GFP infection, or splice as they say, right? Now, at the time when that came out, when I first noticed it in my tank, I had green Bacillopora, PDAM, that was spawning and taking over everything. So I'm like, okay, maybe it got some of that.
Yeah, it does that polyp bailout, right? They call it. It's like an asexual reproduction. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not spawn as it is a bailout, right? But I also had a green candy cane, Clastria coral, and I had a Morishidal at the time. And my two favorite corals that the Morishidal would eat was that acro and the candy cane. So I'm like, okay, was he mixing those color, like is there something to that too? And then I always thought of like, what if I took that candy cane and blended it up and fed it to coral?
Yeah.
Someone tried that, so it would be a thing. But so I've always wondered, like, what was the cause of it? But then again, like, I have another one, like, I've isolated that colony that popped up again too, right? So is it just the coral?
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. I mean, I think about some of the corals, like that kryptonite candy cane is a super high in that fluorescent protein. I mean, it's as neon yellow green as you can get. And same with I have this Acropora Florida Slimer type that's it's as absolutely as metallic neon green as you can get. So is there a way to take some of that protein or whatever it is exactly? Is it something in the zooxanthellae in that coral in particular? But can we transplant that? That would be an interesting experiment to do if you had an intentional way to do it.
And that's where I would like to learn more about spawning, because the coral larvae, and when they're baby corals, they don't have any color, right? They're taking on those colors as they grow. So are they choosing what color to be? So at that point, could we manipulate the coral to be a color?
Yeah, good point. It's like an open canvas at that point.
Yeah. Or if well, and we know there's a bunch of people that have these spliced corals now. Well, not a bunch, but people are having it. So is it just as corals are in our system, are they just taking on new colors? Is it just the corals constantly looking for, hey, maybe I'm doing okay, but in this system, what if I take this from another coral? Like, are they just swimming around? Like, are they looking for and then now, okay, now I'm going to thrive with this color.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for example, if you had an acro that completely bleached for some reason, it's going to look to repopulate the zooxanthellae. And is it going to just take on the zooxanthellae that's from the environment it originated, or is it a chance that, say it's a coral from Indonesia, is there a chance it's going to pick up some pigments from, Aussie coral that might affect the overall look and the overall color of it differently? It could be an interesting experiment.
Well, that's what I wonder, because the acro that I had it happen to, my Moorish idol was large, and it just turned on overnight on my corals, and it shredded it. Like, if you ever had one of the, like, those blue-eyed crabs that, like, acro-eating crabs.
Yeah, those little, I know those guys.
Gorilla crab. I don't know what the scientific name is, but we call them gorilla crabs, and they have the blue eyes. They're hairy, and you don't notice you have like two on a little collar. Like when I used to bring corals in a long time ago, or you go buy a mariculture coral, and it would be on it, you wouldn't notice, and then the next day it's like, where'd all my tips go? It's just shredded. Like, so the Moorish idol shredded that coral down to like nothing, and I was and then I moved the fish, and it came back, and then when it healed, then it started showing these different colors. So is it, like you said, is it something to do with, is this coral hurt? Is it trying to heal itself in a way that it can in the location it's at, or what the surroundings it's in? I don't know.
Yeah, no, and I think the more time you have sort of with corals marinating in a system, even touching each other, I let some things grow into each other if one's not just totally melting the other one, and they just kind of hit each other but don't necessarily burn, I'll just see how it plays out. It's worth just seeing if you might get something might happen eventually. Like, you never know. Like, I think some of the really cool corals that might be the future of the hobby, if we ever stop having corals imported, are going to be weird morphs and occurrences that we get in our tanks.
Or they're all going to morph over time.
Yeah,
As we're always trying to chase that perfect lighting to what we had before.
Yeah.
Are things going to slowly just drift on, right? But
yeah. No, we're always kind of, I have to check myself to look back sometimes and be like, well, the system did really well when I didn't pay any attention to trace elements, and, what was different back then. I would say overall, like, I'm always getting better at this, but there's probably times where it's like, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or like you make a change that maybe overall just wasn't positive to the system. I guess this is a question I've been asking people. Is there a product that you started using that you would say in a like reasonable amount of time you saw like a really positive effect from, like, let's say like a food or amino or some kind of additive? I think you keep it pretty simple, but
AcroPower.
Yeah.
I've always used AcroPower, and it's like before, like if you like, I've had those like the Montipora black bugs. Have you seen those before? Like those, it looks like the red bug.
Yeah, I've seen those on Montes. Yeah, same thing.
I had them a long time ago, and the Montes are all, and so I'm like dosing AcroPower like crazy. And it seemed to like, okay, these corals are staying alive. Same with red bugs. It seems to help. That was like a thing back in the day where we all dumped a bunch of AcroPower in. Now, so I've always kept doing it. And when I had dinos like 2 years ago, and my Ghanies all bleached out, I had like bright pink, and they lost their coloration, I took them out of the tank and put them in a different system, and I fed them, like, I overdosed AcroPower in that tank, and it was like quickly that they started to turn around, and you could see like they're semi-closed, and then I would dose it, and then they open up. They put their tentacles out farther. I'm like, okay, they're looking for food. And then I was like, okay, now I can feed them more. And I got them back. Where it's like, when a Ghani, you're like, oh no, it's gone. Like I had this Ghani that grew from a frag, and the skeleton alone was like 9 inches, right?
Mm-hmm.
Across, and I'm like, if I lose this, it's gonna be so sad. Like it was
Totally.
just
Yeah.
right. So and then it's all closed up for days, and I'm like, it's a goner, right? It's lost now it's bleaching pink. For me, and it's the simplest thing. Now, how much of it actually ends up in my tank? Like, does it just go straight to the skimmer? So when I dose Acro Power, I dose the maximum amount for my tank in one shot every 3 days.
Okay. So what is the volume and dose you're doing then?
I need to check. I think it's 100 and some, like 150 mils. Wow. I'm doing every 3 days, or 120.
And what's your total water volume?
650 gallons with my frag system and my sump.
Yeah, okay.
Not including rods.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Off my head, it's like 100 or 150, maybe 120. I'm trying to. So I do it in one shot every 3 days now. So I think some people will put on like a dosing pump, and they're like, okay, the instructions say do this over a week. But if
the
you
instructions
do that,
are a bit weird. Yeah.
But if you do that, it's like, okay, if I'm dosing like 3 mils, it's just going to go in your tank, probably on the surface, out your over, and then in the skimmer and gone, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that by doing this larger amount. Now I haven't experimented, like, what if I double that? Mm-hmm. Or is it just going straight to the skimmer and going away? But for me, it's one of those, like, it's not that expensive. It's not that expensive for me, and I have 650 gallons.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I do get better pricing, but so it's not that expensive. It's not going to hurt your tank unless it's thriving. If you're having other issues, like I did, like if it's thriving cyano or something, right? Like if something's going on and you're dosing these products. But it's one of those things, like, it's never hurt the tank for me. Mm-hmm. It feels good to put it in.
Yeah, I think your point is it's kind of like essentially like a nutrient spike, or a spike of amino, rather than having it just on a regular drip. You're kind of giving an opportunity, and you're going to see that kind of variation in the ocean too, where there's going to be, exactly. little variation where there's a bit more nutrients, little planktonic blooms that pop up, and inconsistency, I think, can be a good thing in our tanks when it comes to nutrients and feeding.
Well, just like for us, right? Like if you like, hamburgers taste good, but if I eat hamburgers every day, like, I'm going to be worse than I am now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't. Same with, like, we need aminos to survive, right? Maybe not to survive, but like we need them to be healthy. So there's a lot of things, like, I think people think, oh, this is good. Like, I'm going to do reef rides are great. I'm going to dump them in my tank every day, or I'm going to feed. Like, and people are feeding. Their fish are getting fat. Like, it's like you said, it's good to change things up and not do the same thing every day. So it's more realistic. Like, it's more like treat your corals like you treat yourself in a way, right? Like, I'm not going to eat the same thing. I'm not going to do the same thing every day. Let's change it up. Yeah. And
totally.
I think we'll be like, every time I've tried to keep that super tight alkalinity and it drifts, then I have issues. Now I just kind of let it wander. Like, I don't stress. I'll kind of I let my alk sometimes go from 8 to 9.5, 10, and then back down to 8, and I just kind of let it do its thing, and don't try to chase it. Mm-hmm. And things seem to be healthier.
Yeah. So because we talked about your big up of elk, but so you do kind of shoot for that, let's say 8 to 9 range if you're kind of trying to be ideal.
The only reason why I'm thinking, okay, let's keep it 8 to 9, because 7 sounds great. Mm-hmm. But if something happens and I don't realize it, my tank in a day would go from 7 to 5.5.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's if my tank is at 8.5 DKH and everything fails, I've got a day and a half or 2 days before, at least 2 days before I'm like, okay, I really got to, like, I've got time to catch this issue. So it's like a buffer, right? So that's probably I'm not thinking like, oh, corals are growing better at 8.5, because would they? Like, is it going to, like, it's just the alkalinity it's just what it's available to the corals.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they're only going to take what they can. Now, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would say, in my opinion, elevated pH is more important than elevated alkalinity when it comes to coral growth. Yeah, I mean, I think for that, like, precipitation to occur in a, like, let's say, robust way, like when you have good solid growth, that's occurring in a higher pH range for that to precipitate properly. And I think when it comes to the alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, all the things that are forming the skeleton, the coral's not super picky about what those numbers are. It's just going to take them and smack them all together and make growth, right?
Yeah. Exactly, right?
Yeah.
But again, like, I don't want people to go out and start crazy chasing their pH.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
A lot of times it's like, people are like, oh my God, I got to have this number. I got to get my corals to grow fast. And I'm at the point now, I'm like, okay, how do I got to get my corals to slow down. Like,
yeah.
They're going too fast. Like, this is a problem. I can't sell corals fast enough.
Yeah.
So now what do I do? Do I just keep upgrading more frag systems, or do I just throw them in the garbage? Or I give them away?
I think, I mean, at this point, I think you got to start, like, putting a few higher end pieces in, because what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Grow, this whatever stag forever? Like, if you're growing coral, grow expensive ones.
I'm attached. Like,
yeah.
I've got a tank that I can't even see in the back room that's got a huge toadstool in that I've had forever. I can't get rid of it.
Yeah.
And I've got a gigantic chunk of bird's nest that I can't throw out.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and I'm only joking too, because I think you seem like a reefer that you kind of reef for the right reasons. You collect stuff you enjoy that grows well, that it's for you, it's not for selling, and I appreciate that, because inevitably, like, if you're good at growing coral, you're kind of probably going to end up selling some, or like, whether trading it or selling it, you're going to have a surplus at some point, right?
And now I just, like, when I do sell, I just sell to stores. So
yeah,
that's in a way, but at the same time, it's weird how corals change. Like, so, like, you'll think to yourself, like, I remember I looked forever. I wanted, like, the little red Ferrari. Like, that was, like, I wanted that coral so bad. It was so awesome. The red and the yellow, like, the gold polyps coming out. I'm like, I need this coral. And I got one, grew it out, and I've got a big colony of it. I've got a pile of frags, and it's like, nobody wants them anymore.
Yeah. It's just as nice of a coral as it was, but it's just become too common. It's the curse.
Is it too common, or is it's not what social media is showing as amazing?
Yeah,
because it's an amazing coral.
It is, and it's
right?
like you might as well toss your Pac-Man or needle in a haystack out, because that's just kind of a similar looking coral that just kicks its butt. Yeah.
But you have a red dragon in your tank, or a purple dragon, or a needle in a haystack, and you stand 50 feet away, it's like, boom, right?
Yeah.
And
they're different.
It grows
enough.
and lives. So yeah. But I mean, you have some amazing corals. So I should probably look at, maybe adding some different colors, and places where in my tank where it's like, hey, there's too much green here, there's too much pink, and because I try to always have that, like, purple, red, green combination kind of going on.
Yeah.
At least really, and then what corals do well together, and which ones, and different textures of. So this is a different green, this is a different purple, this is, so it's always like a mix, right? So that's what I'm trying to look for. Like, so a lot of corals I have are just solid color.
Yeah.
Like a blueberry one.
Yeah.
Or the, but another coral that I think is like rainbow loom. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Grows amazing, so amazing, but it's popular, but it's not as popular as it should be.
Yeah. Well, it's just such a good grower, though. Again, it's just like there's a lot of people. True. It might be one of the first acros that their buddy just cuts them a piece for free or whatever. And but yeah, no, I agree. It's a beautiful piece. Actually, so I think we should probably close up pretty soon here.
Okay.
Was there anything else you wanted to say about any specific
corals? I worry. So I worry that as we follow these trends of only looking for those crazy named corals, and as wholesalers are collecting just tenuous, all these things, all those cool, interesting corals are going to be gone. So what happens if this is the trend we follow now. Say it's like, okay, we're only going to bring in millipore, or we're only going to bring in tenuous for the next 5 years, and then they close into them, or they close these things. Now, all those corals that we used to go to the fish store and you get so excited, like you see a pavona and you're like, what is that? What is this really cool lepto? And it's like gold, or this branching salmon coral. Like there's all these crazy corals that we're never going to see again, right? So if one of those places closed and we've only been collecting these high-end corals, now our market is just going to be saturated in these high-end corals.
Yeah. Well, and they won't continue to be high-end.
Now Walt Disney is going to be the bird's nest.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not, because it goes fast.
Yeah.
People can't keep them alive as easy, but I'm worried that I hope that people start recognizing corals for the shape and realize that I want my tank to look like a reef and not this same coral species tank.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I have quite a variety of species, quite a few different stags, lots of non-tenuous millies, but I've seen wholesalers bring in shipments where they just say to the supplier, just millies and tenuous, nothing else. We don't want anything else.
Because that's what's selling right now.
That's what's selling. Yeah. And one of the other unfortunate parts of it is, like out of all the, let's say, red polyp tenuous that have come in, I still haven't seen one that's better than the TGC cherry bomb. The cherry bomb is better than any of those maricultured ones. So it's like, like you might bring in some stuff and it might look nice, but like we already have probably the nicest version of that exists anyways. So
that is one coral. Like back to before we cut out here, the back is the cherry bomb. That's one I have. And I've moved it around so many times, and I've finally found a spot where it's getting like those bright red, bright pink polyps, and it's just super fuzzy. And then if you get the lighting right, it's like blue with bright red polyps. It's amazing. Like like you said, you're not getting better, but it's one of those corals. It's like, how come it's not pink today? Why is it not? And I had to find that perfect lighting flow combination, and now when I'm doing more trace, it seems like it's got that pink back, but like you said, that's one. Like maybe they'll find one maybe one will splice one day and it's going to be the same coral with blue, pink with green coming up, but
that one is just gangbusters for me. I can't believe how fast it grows compared to other tenuous.
Really?
It's like, I would say, I'll send you a picture, but I mean, I probably can grow like a 1-inch frag into like a 4-inch colony in 6 months. like no joking. Like it's just once it gets a bunch of axial tips, it's like rapid growth, crazy fast grower. So we can compare placement notes and see
what years is that, and what, like my orange passion grows way faster than it. Like I'll cut a frag and then it's like it's already there again. Like it's healed, right?
The funny thing that you say that, because orange passion grows kind of slow for me lately, so we got to figure this out.
Yeah, right.
I got the invert. Yeah.
That's weird. So your orange passion. So when mine grows, I've got about 1 inch of white and blue, kind of, right?
Yeah.
And then it to that green, and it gets all those orange polyps. So it has like that large growth tip that you see. But for the longest time, it was just sitting and growing vertical and growing, and then it grew into a section of flow, and it's just now it's take off, and it's growing.
It found the conditions it needed. You didn't put it there; it found them. Yeah. I like that.
Still something. But
that's a good testament to your patience, and just leaving things alone. Yeah. So, I'd like to close the show off with this rapid fire questions. So, I don't know. I feel like people should get points for the rapidness of how fast they can answer. But, okay, so here we go. Okay, so favorite fish?
Favorite fish? Angelfish.
Okay.
I'm going to say the Kengai angel. I have one, or a regal angel.
Okay, cool. Favorite SPS?
Oh, tort. If I only could have one, it would be a tort.
Okay,
tort.
I like that. Favorite LPS? Can be species or specific coral?
Chalice.
Okay, cool. Softy?
Fiji leather.
Nice. You're the second person to say that out of 3 guests so far. I like that.
Sarka fighting would be my
Nice.
answer.
Okay. Favorite lighting source if you're using just one lighting source?
LED now.
Yeah. Okay.
Just because of controllability. I could have my tank any color I want.
Yeah. No,
So,
I agree.
With me, because with Instagram and stuff, for taking photos, like all I do is go into scenes, push a button, and it takes a photo. I don't
you're good
have
to
filter
go.
on my phone. I can have anything I want in my tank, any spectrum I want at any time.
Yeah, that's so adaptable. Okay, favorite product line if you could choose just one product line that you used exclusively for your system.
Tropic Marine.
Yeah. Okay. And then favorite salt
Just
in your experience.
now, Tropic Marine.
Yeah. Okay.
Even with that scare, I trust them more than anybody else now because of that.
They may have lit a fire under their ass to make sure quality control is better than ever.
Now, like for example, like if you were to go on a flight somewhere, would you rather fly on an airplane that has never had an accident? In
Good point.
Or one that had an accident years ago. So now it's who's checking all their stuff and who's being complacent. So I feel like Tropic Marine is not complacent right now.
No, that's a good point. Okay, favorite, not sure how much experience you have with different brands, but favorite aquarium controller?
I'm going to say Neptune.
Yeah. Okay.
And now it'll always be Neptune because of Mobius and Ecotech and everything going together. It's just I'm just going to follow.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, favorite wave pump?
Favorite wave pump? Oh, Tunzi.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry. For the reason that if you're a lazy reefer, a Tunzi, I have a Tunzi in the back of my tank. I haven't taken out in 3 years.
Yeah. Wow. Doesn't need cleaning. Just keeps doing
Doesn't
its
need
thing.
cleaning. Yeah. If I cleaned it, but like if you haven't it before, you can just swap the wet sides. But again, big piece of sand gets behind them, they're grinding, and they're making noise. So it's hard. MP40s are amazing too, right? So I just off the top of my head, Tunzi just for like
reliability. Longevity. Yeah, totally. Okay, most hated pest.
Most hated pest would be Aptasia. I don't have any, but
yeah, that's fair.
Sorry, or Montepora. You can do. There's the worst, but Aptasia was something I hated my whole life.
Yeah,
I was like, at the beginning, it's like I hate, even though it doesn't really do anything bad. Like
no, it's just there. It's like red planaria flatworms. It's just there. But
flatworms, they don't do it. They're just there. They're ugly. So it's like I can't. So sorry, if I were to change the answer, it would be my most hated thing in the world is clove polyps.
Oh yeah. Well,
there is selling clove polyps.
Fembendazole that shit, man. Easy.
Yeah.
Done.
No, don't burn. Don't do that. Don't burn corals, but throw in the garbage.
Yeah.
Compost it. Get rid of it. That stuff. It'll destroy your tank.
Yeah.
Like it takes. I mean, unless you want that cool look, but stop.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a pain in the butt. But I've actually found a low dose of fenbendazole can kill the clove polyps and not affect any corals or snails. So, future episode, I'm sure that will come up. Final question. This is kind of a fun thought exercise. So, if money was, let's say, no object, or if you were in a financial position to do so, would you do a polo reef?
No.
No. Okay. Why not?
Why? Because I couldn't trust somebody else to work on my tank.
But like you have enough money to say like pay someone like you really, really well to do it.
Couldn't trust them.
Like say if I was like Jay, I'm setting up this tank. I'm set, bro. I got so much money now. I'm gonna bring you and your family over here, pay you $10 million a year to maintain my tank. Not that I'm saying anybody gets paid that much to maintain his tank, but say
pay me to do that, I wouldn't go there, but I still I would. So the answer to that is no, I wouldn't do it for the fact that I couldn't trust somebody. I would want to be the one doing it myself.
Yeah.
But if the other way around is yes, I would want to do Polo Reef, but it wouldn't be in my house. If I had the means, I would do Polo Reef somewhere for the public.
Yeah. No, that's a good way to put it, for sure, to make it accessible for the public.
Anybody could go to, and then I could spread what the joy of my hobby to, or I would like to the world, like to city, right? Then I would be okay with paying someone to do it. But if it was my personal aquarium, it's no longer my personal aquarium. It's now a personal art piece that I'm paying people to do it. But again, you get all the fish you want. Like the fish you have is insane. Like I can't.
Yeah, it's crazy. But I think that's a really good point. I mean, I think to be able to inspire, especially young generations who, could be future marine biologists, they could see, a beautiful tank that absolutely blows their mind and makes them want to pursue that in their life. And even just gives you the overall appreciation for the life in the ocean, because some people have never even seen a live coral before, No. Yeah.
Which I guess he's doing, right? Because he's all over social media. So you're doing that anyways, right? With your social media presence, you are doing that. But again, I am too much of a control freak. I couldn't.
Yeah. Okay.
So
I've had similar answers.
The only tank I could have maintained. So, or I'd be allowed to buy.
Yeah.
Like it comes to a certain point where do we live in a house or do we live in an aquarium?
Yeah. Here's the wall to our bedroom. Oh yeah, it's a tank. It's a huge tank.
I have a secret long goal where when I'm about to retire, it's like, okay, can I somehow put a 12-foot by 4-foot deep tank in my garage and cut the wall open with LVL? So now the whole wall down our hallway is a tank.
That would be awesome.
Hopefully she doesn't listen to this podcast.
Probably not. All right, man. Well, this has been great. I think there's been a lot of good info in here, and we'll definitely do it again. Thanks, man. Let's keep in touch. Yeah, me too. I know. All right, man. Thanks so much. Really appreciate you coming on, and I will do a bio and link to all your stuff when I get this episode wrapped up.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah.
Can't wait to hear it.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Okay. Have a good night. Cheers.
You too.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond the Reef with Unorthodox Reef. If you want to check out his Instagram, you can find him as unorthodox_reef. Easy to find. And I will link to anything else that was discussed in this podcast, anything else to do with Jay's setup. We will make sure you can find it. And if you have any suggestions for future guests, want to just ask us a question, make a suggestion, make a criticism, whatever you want to say, feel free to reach out at beyondthereefpod@gmail.com. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and leave us a review. And if you're looking for high-quality aquacultured corals in Canada, please check us out at fraggarage.ca. Hope to hear from you soon.